Now, in the previous video, I talked about notes and where they are on the piano and where they are on the stave, on the musical stave. Next up is rhythm. Of course, for a tune to be interesting, you've got to not only have a range of notes, but also a range of rhythms. Now, what's it all about then? Well, if we look at MuseScore on your screen at the moment, you've got something that shows 4/4 time at the left-hand side there. 4/4. That is called common time as well. It's basically pretty much what most music is written in. So what does it mean, 4/4? Well, it means 4 beats in a bar. 4, the top figure, is how many beats there are, and the bottom figure is what that beat is. The Americans call them quarter notes, which actually is a very, very smart way of dealing with things rather than their Italian or otherwise technical terms, so crotchet and quaver and minim and semibreve and all of those things. Of course, they are, you need to know those, but a crotchet is a beat. So if I set MuseScore playing with a metronome, every single beat there represents a crotchet or quarter note, and there are 4 of them in each bar. The top bar on MuseScore is expanded so that you can see that. So just going back to the beginning. So there were 5 beats altogether there, but the 5th one was the beginning of the next bar. There was also a slightly higher note on the metronome which dictates where beat 1 is. You can get a similar thing on a keyboard. Of course, this doesn't have the accented beat, although you can set it that way. Now, this means that if I put a note, if I put 4 C's there, remember where C is, the 3rd space up. If I go back and play that, I have a note that appears on every metronome beat. It's a little bit dull. Now, if I just maybe take one of these notes and make them into what are called quavers. There we go. I now have a rhythm that has 2 faster notes at the beginning, or the second beat. I've got da, 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 da. Now, every time you change the value of a note, you either halve its length or double its length. There are others as well, but for the time being, we're just going to work with that. So quavers are twice as fast as crotchets. So if I just go back to the beginning and press play, you will hear that that second beat, the notes go quicker. Like that. Now you can have notes that are longer. If I took the 3rd beat here and made it into a minim instead, you can see that the final note disappeared because actually I've got to have 4 beats in a bar. I can't have any more than 4 beats in a bar. If I want to have more notes, of course, they appear in subsequent bars. So now what we've got is ba, 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 ba. We've got a longer note at the end. So if I just press play on that. So you have your longer notes. Now you can have even longer notes than that. You can have something called a semibreve, which occupies the entire bar. If I just do that, take the first C and make it into a semibreve, you can see that it lasts the entire bar. So you might have a note like that maybe at the end of a piece of music. Now, if I take that note and turn it into this, I've got something called semiquaver now. These are really fast. The Americans call these 16th notes, and for good reason. There are 16 of them in a standard measure or bar of 4/4 time. So if I press play now, you'll hear that the metronome is clicking away, but there are 4 notes for every beat. Yeah. Lots of drummers would play that on the hi-hat cymbals. A 16 beat, as it's known, because of 16th notes. Now, in addition to notes, you can have rests. If I just take that note and make it into a crotchet, I'm actually going to do that. Have 4 crotchets once again there. If I take the second one away, it reveals a symbol that is, this time, a silence. So you either have in rhythm, you either have something happening, like a note, or you have something that's not happening, which is a rest. So if I go back to the beginning here and press play now, you will hear that the second beat, there's no note. And there we are. So you either have rests or notes, and there is a symbol for each rhythmic delineation of a note, whether it's a semi-breve or a minim or a crotchet, quaver, semiquaver. There are rest equivalents as well. So if I just make that a semiquaver now, that's C there, you can see that next to it is a semiquaver rest. And then next to that is a quaver rest. So with your maths class, when you're doing fractions, 1/16 plus 1/8, that's what rhythm is about here. Now you can have other things like dotted rhythms. Now of course these take a little bit more explaining, but if I, for example, had two crotchets. So there we go, I've reinstated the 4 beats of the note C. But let's say I want the first C to be a bit longer and take a little bit away from the second C. So instead of this, I'd have this. How am I going to do that? Well, if I make this note, this first note longer, if I take that crotchet and make it into a minim, of course it's going to occupy those two bits of space. So that means that the second note's gone. Well, what can I do? I can have 1 beat or 2 beats, but actually you can have 1.5 beats where it takes up most of it, 3/4 of the space, and then leaves a little bit at the end for that other note. This time I'd go back to crotchet and I'd add the dot. Now what happens here is that it then reveals a quaver rest here. So I've taken 1.5 beats and left half a beat here. Now what I end up with here now is a da, ba, ba, ba. So if you listen to the metronome, the second beat actually comes in the middle of that first note before then allowing that next note just before the third beat. A dotted rhythm actually takes a little bit of getting used to. In my 25 years as a music educator, actually this takes a little bit of grasping, and I'm going to show you how it works in little bits as well. So if I just press play from the beginning. Ba, 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 ba. Now what we can do is we can notate this in another way. If I take this note here and then put 3 others there, so I've now got 4 quaver beats there. This is how you break down that dotted quarter note or dotted crotchet. It becomes 3 of these. Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba. So when you're singing that longer note, you could emphasize slightly with your voice to actually say what that note is made of. So a dotted crotchet is made of 3 quavers, whereas a crotchet is 2 quavers. So we've got a dotted crotchet which goes and then you've got your quaver. Ba, 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 ba. So that's what that would sound like. Of course, we've got to try and tie these things together. So if we do that, and then that, what the computer will do now is it will play this note, but it won't play the next one or the one after that, but it will play this one. So if we go back to the beginning and play that. So if I play that back now on the computer, you'd hear this. You'd hear those 3 quavers being played as one note, and then the one at the end, this one, as a single note. So that's the best way of explaining what a dotted rhythm is. It's made up of little bits. If you've got a ruler in the house, the inch scale, if you've got an old enough ruler, is a really good way of explaining music because inches tended to be divided into 16ths and 8ths and quarters, whereas centimetres are no use to anybody when it comes to music because it's all in tens, which is not a musical thing. Now, I could change the time signature. What's the time signature? Remember I said at the beginning about the 4/4 time. If I took that away now, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to find time signature. Now this time I've now got 3/4 time. So if I open up the computer, you can see that I've got a bar, but with 3/4. 3/4 is called a waltz. It's got 3 beats in the bar. So if I were to add a crotchet here, Notice I can only fit 3 of those things in now instead of the 4 beforehand. So the metronome will now beat with a little high note every 3 instead of 4. In fact, it's a low note that the metronome emphasises for the first beat of the bar. It goes gum, ga, ga, gum, ga, ga. But that's fine. And then you can fit all of your other note values in if you like. So I could have a bar with 2 quavers. I could have 4 semiquavers and a crotchet. See what that sounds like. Bum bum ba 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 bum, rum bum ba 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 bum, rum ba 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 bum. It's an interesting rhythm. So there are rhythms. Now, of course, it can get a bit more complicated than this, but it's the understanding and it's the nature of all of these different note values being able to contribute to make actually an interesting rhythm up.